Temple University in Philadelphia.
And what was your dissertation?
My dissertation research was actually on attitude and behavior toward South Africa's diamond industry. It was, completely different from this work. But I was looking at whether when people find out about the economic exploitation in South Africa's diamond industry, does it change their attitude and behavior toward diamonds? And the answer is no. People still have to have it.
So you live here in South Carolina?
I live in Atlanta, just outside of Atlanta. Yes. And I teach at Tuskegee University, teach history and African American studies. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Lisa Bratton. It is an honor for me to be here to present to you some of my research about historic Brattonsville. I've always loved coming here. I've been coming here since I was a child. My father brought us here, and I said, wow, we're rich. This is great. I just love it. Because we grew up in California, and I never saw anything with the Bratton name on it in California unless it was dealing with the five of us. So when I got here for the first time as a child, I said, oh, this is wonderful. But I didn't know anything about the legacy of enslavement. I didn't know. So then I got a little older, and I thought that everybody knows where their plantation is. All you do is, if you're looking for where your family was enslaved, you just drive around for a little while and you'll find where it is. I didn't really think that Brattonsville was all that special. Then I got a little older, and so now I'm at the point where I really do recognize historic Brattonsville for the treasure that it is. So today I'm going to be talking about, usually when I come to Brattonsville, I talk about my family legacy. My great-great-grandparents, Green and Melinda Bratton, were enslaved here on this plantation, and I will talk a little about them. But today I'm going to talk more about what I learned along the way about surprising facts that surprised me about enslavement as a result of doing my research here. As a result of my research, I found so many interesting facts about enslavement. I have a PhD in African American Studies, and I'm learning more as a result of this work. So I'm a college professor, so I don't mind questions. If you don't have to wait until the end, because then you might forget it. We don't want that. So raise your hand and stop me. I'm very comfortable with that. I'm also, I like participation, so I might throw out a question there and we'll see. And I got a lot of help right there from her. So I got my first little bit of participation from my little friend back here. Thank you. All right, so now. Okay, so this is my family lineage. As I mentioned, my great-great-grandparents, Green and Melinda Bratton, were enslaved here. His Green and Melinda's son, William, and his wife, Mary Hemphill Bratton, also lived in the area. They had children, one of which was my grandfather, Walter Green Bratton, who married Mary Williamson Bratton of the Williamson Plantation. And then my father, John Walter Bratton, married my mother, who's also from South Carolina, and moved to California in the 50s. So, but I still have very, very strong ties here, and I love this part of the world. So here's a picture of Green Bratton, and he's also on the cover of my book, shameless plug, but this book is available in the bookstore, and what it is, because it's taken me so long to finish my full-length book, I did this as kind of a way to remind myself, okay, Lisa, get it done, and at least to have something to share with people when I speak. And I'll be happy to sign it for you afterwards if you like, no problem. So, one of the stories that I had heard my entire life growing up, this picture of Green Bratton stood on our mantle for my entire life. So we'd ask my father, who is that? And he'd say, that's Green Bratton, So he didn't really talk a whole lot about who he was because Green Bratton died just around the time my father was born in 1917. So my father never knew him, but he told us about the land that my family, still in our family, down at the end of the road where you turn in on 324, I believe it is. And so we always knew about the land, but my father always told us that Green Bratton got the land from his white father, and the deed, so I got over and asked him about it. He said, I said, well, where's the paperwork? Where's the deed? He said, well, it's lost in York County. It was never recorded because Green Bratton was a former slave. And so he just wasn't real clear about how that land went from the white Brattons to Green Bratton. So I am looking in the Bratton family papers in South Carolina, and I come across this document, which I know you can't read it, but I wanted to show it anyway because it is a record of Green Bratton having worked for the years 1878, 1879 to save up the money for the land. Okay, and then it also says that he's buying 10 acres at $10 an acre. You wish, right? $10 an acre. And then what he did was save the money with John Bratton, with the white plantation owner, former plantation owner, held the money for him and even paid him interest on it, which is very unusual. Because now let's think about this. If John Bratton had said, what money? You didn't give me any money. You know, what is Green Bratton going to do? Nothing. Okay, well, he doesn't have any recourse in the eyes of the law. So this is the document, this is the record documenting that Green Bratton wasn't given anything. He worked for the land. So what did he do? He threshed wheat. He built an arbor, just but maybe children don't know. It's like maybe some branches and trees that hang together so that you can have shade. Okay, that's an arbor. He hoed cotton. He threshed cotton, ginned cotton. So he worked for these years to purchase this land. The balance of the land was due on December 31st, but he paid it off 13 days early. I'm so proud of that. And so this is it contradicted the story that I heard my entire life. Now my father is telling me what he heard from his father and his father before him. So, but this was it. And it also says the first 10 acres. So the first 10 acres, I didn't know there was a second 10 acres. So whether or not he bought the second 10 acres, I'm not certain. But Denise Jensen, who was a researcher at McKelvey Center, one of my favorite people here, between the two of us, we have not been able to find any freedman / former slave who had purchased land before him. So to our knowledge, Green and Belinda Bratton were the first freedmen to purchase land in York County. Yeah, thank you on behalf of them. So I'm really proud of that, but I still couch it in, until I find someone else who purchased land before they did, Green and Belinda were the first.
What year was that?
1879. 1879, so it would have been 14 years after the end of slavery. So you go from slavery to landowner in 14 years, which is pretty impressive. Yeah. Okay, the family of the McClurksons. The McClurksons were a free family who lived here in Brattonsville. There were two brothers, Adam and Isaac. And I think sometime in history books and maybe in the media, it makes it seem as though free people had it easy. They did not. And not that slaves had it easy either. It's hard on black people everywhere in the country at this time. And so the McClurksons, being a family of free people, did business with the Brattons, from what we can tell by the documents. And so, I know you can't read this, so I have a transcript. And I'll just read it to you. Known by all these presents, that's kind of this legal jargon that they always use in the 1800s. I, Isaac McClurkin, do bind myself to work as a slave to John Bratton until he is satisfied, or the space of 2 months to commence when he wishes, for a sum of $3.30. So what does that mean? That means that Isaac McClurkin borrowed some money from John Bratton, couldn't pay it back. So he bound himself into slavery for 2 months to pay back the $3.30. So for children who are listening, say $3.30. You might have $3.30 in your pocket right now as a child, but you should understand that back in those days, $3.30 was a whole lot of money. Okay, and he couldn't pay it back, so he bound himself over to be able to work as a slave until he could pay the balance back. And this is the first instance that I have ever heard of this happening, and maybe it was more common than I think, but to my knowledge, this was the first time that this has happened.
So,
Yes.
so Mr. McClurkin, was he a Caucasian fellow? Or?
He was a black man. He was a free black man.
So how common was that in South Carolina?
There was in York County anyway, a small number of free blacks. There was the Wright family, Harry Wright, and his family, and the McClurksons. Now, how do we know this? The Brattons also had a store, and so they kept records of every purchase that anyone made. And so for the Wright family and the McClurkin family, they put colored after their name. You know, Harry Wright bought whatever, molasses, but it say Harry Wright colored, and then his purchases. So that's how we know. So I went through all of the store records looking for more colored people who were designated colored, and those were the only two I found.
So how did they become free?
I don't know. I do know that the McClurksons were once slaves, and they were free in 1824. The document, one of the documents that mentions them being free in 1824. I don't know how they got free, and I wish I knew. But they were former slaves. They were a former slave family. I don't know. It could have been through a heroic deed or some sort. It could have been they saved up and purchased their freedom as a possibility. But you know, and sometimes slaves were able to work. You know, more so on the coast, but sometimes slaves were able to work. But I don't know how he got his freedom. I wish I did. Yes.
A couple of things. First of all, the census counted slaves and free blacks, and in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, it ran usually 1 to 2% of the blacks were free. Throughout the whole